What's up, friends? Tonight we're going to be checking out Diplomacy is Not an Option, a game that's been in early access for quite some time, more than 2 years in fact, and is about to leave to officially enter its 1.0 status. With this big update is coming a ton of new features and improvements, the biggest of which is the full release of its campaign. They are promising over 30 hours of gameplay for a single playthrough, with over 100 hours for all mission paths. This comes in the form of being able to choose which faction you want to support during those missions. In the missions currently present, that being the first two, you can choose between the peasants who are rising up in rebellion and the crown. And this is where the story will begin. A peasant uprising taking place over what else? Taxes. As an American myself, I've been hearing about the need to fight the crown over the state of taxes my whole life, am I right? Now, they say this fork will occur many times throughout the campaign, and as you make these choices, it will impact the next mission you are offered in the campaign, and will change the final ending that you receive. So this is where the 100 hours of content, if you play every route, comes in. Version 1.0 is said to include at least 3 factions to support, at least 6 possible endings, and a wide variety of mission goals. So with all this information, you might be wondering, what is Diplomacy is Not an Option? If you're like me, you might have incorrectly assumed that this game was one of those kind of niche battle sim kind of games like Tabs or Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. But it is in fact a base-building survival real-time strategy game, complete with many of the features of a strategy game of this style. Think of something akin to the old Stronghold games. You're going to find yourself building up your castle, putting walls up around it, and training your troops to defend the workers as they go about the task of gathering your wood, ore, and other supplies. There's also a good variety of RNG to each mission. The placement of your starting location, as well as supplies you have around you, are going to be different each time. So you can find yourself getting a favorable starting position or not. This adds to the fun for me personally, as I didn't want failing a mission to become a process of simply redoing steps 1 through 5 over and over again. So I was quite happy when loading back in to take another shot at a mission I'd failed to be presented with a whole new layout to try my luck at making some better decisions. So if all this sounds interesting to you, then stick around and we're going to explore some more of this game, Diplomacy is Not an Option. We'll also include some information about other modes that they have, such as challenge modes, sandbox mode, and the endless mode. So all of this coming together with the 1.0 release and the release of the full campaign promising 100 hours means that this game could very well net you hundreds upon hundreds of hours of entertainment, all for one low price. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's do a little diving into the tutorial here. Now, much of what they show in the tutorial is kind of your expected fare. When you begin to start the game, it'll warn you, hey, this game is a little bit complicated. You might want to take a look at the tutorial, which I opted to do so, because at this point I still wasn't even really sure what kind of game this was. And again, pleasantly surprised to find out it was a survival RTS, not a sort of a gimmicky kind of thing like Tabs. They'll have you run through, the camera controls, which you can do all the expected stuff you'd expect to be able to do, rotate the camera, zoom in and out, and then they'll begin to take you through some of the building basics. The town hall or your castle is where everything sort of originates. Again, much like a Stronghold kind of game, you can select units and move them around in all the expected kind of patterns. Though I will say that this game, when it comes to unit control, is a little bit better than some other strategy games I have played. I have played strategy games where they don't include the ability to set up control groups. I have played games where they don't have an attack move option that works well, things like that, and I am very grateful to Diplomacy is Not an Option for including all these. Everything worked much like you would expect from a premium AAA kind of strategy game from this small team working on their first game. And I very much applaud them for that. They have a little quick menu down here that gives you access to everything you pretty much need. It's basically like an extension of your town hall, as well as some abilities and research and things like that you'll have the ability to access. And I think this is also very well organized and very well implemented. You'll just go into the build menu, drag out your various buildings. In this case, I wanted us to make a berry picker in order to start gathering some resources. In this case, food. And then from there, you'll begin to jump into all the other expected things, such as forestry, mining, and all that good stuff. You also have, different methods of gathering food. You can have fishermen, which fish is a finite resource. It will run out eventually. And then eventually you kind of get to the point where you can put down like farms and stuff like that to have a renewable resource. I haven't found any indication that there is a seasons kind of system or weather system in the game where, you might enter like a winter time and your crops will not be able to grow. I haven't found anything like that so far. I don't think that's a focus of the game in its current form, which is perfectly fine for me. The game kind of focuses on a simple but complicated approach. Like, there's not an excess amount of buildings and things like that to interact with. It's all very sort of straight line, and some of the buildings you upgrade to higher tiers to give you more options. But there's not just a huge multitude of buildings, which I'm kind of grateful for. I'm okay with it. There are other games out there that offer more options, and if you're looking at the game and going, this lack of building options, this kind of basic feeling, then maybe this isn't the game for you. Maybe you just need something that's wholly more complex. I think this game is going for a simplified kind of basic approach to everything, and I think that's perfectly fine. From there, they just sort of continue to take you through the process of building up materials and stuff like that. They eventually have you, build some housing, and it's all very, pretty straightforward. Very much what you would expect from a tutorial. So let's get into something a little more complicated. Let's get into some actual gameplay and kind of show you how the game progresses as you start to go through it. Now, one thing I do want to highlight that they cover a little bit here in the tutorial is the research tree. It's decently sized. It's got a slight bit of a confusing UI initially, but once you give it a little time and you get used to it and you understand what it's displaying for you, you get a good idea of how it's laid out and where things sort of exist in the timeline here. They're all connected to their various buildings, and they show what base building you require in order to get those technologies unlocked, and so you can start working towards stuff. It's just a little bit confusing at first, but in actuality it's pretty well laid out to make it very clear what you need and how you need to get to it. So as you come into the campaign mode, you'll just be greeted with a message here letting you know that the game is still in early access and that the campaign is not complete. But as we already covered, this is going to be changing with the 1.0 release coming out in September, where the campaign will be fully released. After you click it, you'll have a pop-up that gives you your choice of difficulty and gives you a little blurb about what the story of the game is as of this point. It says, your grandfather, Sir Duncan Ironbow, was a true war hero. In the battle for the independence of Samrania, he chopped 12 Inverland knights and bit off the ear of another. For that, Queen Sybil the Carefree granted him a fief and a title of nobility. The fief has been in a poor place even under your grandfather, yet your father left much of it desolated, especially the wine cellar. When you broke his neck while hunting deer, your reign began. Being young, you wanted to become famous, but after 16 years of a peaceful life in the middle of nowhere, you left those dreams behind. And then we will dive in on the challenge accepted difficulty, because I've played a decent amount of these kind of games before. And this is where the game really kind of grabbed me almost immediately. I like the humor that these devs show in these little bits of story pieces that they have so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of it. In this case, you're sitting in your study or your whatever, and you're the king, and in comes your counselor to hit you for some money because the queen would like some new curtains. One bag of gold not being enough because she wants silk in particular with golden frills. So you need 3 bags of gold to make your wife happy. And then you commence to watching birds out the window because sometimes being the king, I guess, can be a little bit boring. You also seem to imbibe liberally in the drink. And then randomly a man falls off a building and you don't even seem to notice because you're so drunk. And then your counselor comes back to inform you, yeah, that was your squire. He fell off the castle into the moat. So we need a new squire. Obviously, right? We have to have a squire. More money, more expenses. You know, thank you, my lord, as he takes away more of our limited funds. Probably one of the highlights of our kingly day, getting to eat our dinner, and of course, more wine, more drinking, more boredom. And you begin to sense a pattern here as once again, the counselor returns. He says, this time it's about your daughter, my lord. And without even being told, we just hand over the money and say, yes, of course, of course. But now we're out of money, right? Like we no longer have any funds. And we're still just watching birds. So what do we do next? How do we proceed? If anything else comes up that we need money for, we don't have it, right? So once again, the council returns and we say, my lord. And I say, you know, because I'm quite drunk. The tax collector has just arrived. Oh, excellent, excellent. We're going to get some more money, right? Very exciting. Indeed, indeed, my lord. Unfortunately, that is not to be, as we learn at this point that the tax collector did not bring our taxes. And in fact, he was assaulted on the road and barely survived. How could this be? Well, the peasants are revolting and they refuse to pay. A crowd of rebels is even now already marching upon the castle. And we're presented with our first mission. April 28th, 1491. The fire of peasant rebellion suddenly broke out in my fief. The mob wants me, my family, and anyone else who is in any way connected to the royalty dead. A mob of armed peasants is heading to the castle, ravaging everything their dirty rakes can get their hands on. So here we find ourselves thrown into the game with a rebellion already underway heading our direction. So what do we got to do? Well, obviously we have to build defenses. We have to prepare for this battle. But we need food and basic supplies in order to do that first, right? We have to feed our workers who are still loyal to us. That way they can build said defenses. So we need to gather wood. We need to gather food. All the expected things that you would expect to be doing in a strategy game like this. So we'll move forward past these sort of a little bit of basic parts here to get into a little bit more of the action later on. We don't want to spend too much time on just the basics. Because if you play games like this before, you're probably very familiar with a lot of the early sort of build-up. They even give us a catapult to start out with, which is kind of nice. So as you begin to make your way outside your castle with your troops, you'll begin to see that the basic gameplay begins to emerge. You'll have different types of troops. In this case, we started out with swordsmen and archers. And we begin to explore the map, and we'll quickly run into some roaming camps of peasants who are rebelling. And we need to take these camps out, not only to decrease their numbers, because as you can see in the upper corner, it says kill all rebels in the valley, otherwise they will join the final attacking wave. But also, as you saw there, that we picked up off the ground was a little kind of gemstone that allows us to use our magical abilities, and these are very important. Also scattered around the map there, as you saw, you can find little wagons full of supplies, which can give you a nice little boost of supplies. In this case, we picked up some stone, which we don't even have the ability to gather yet. So getting that this early on is actually quite nice. It gives us a nice little boost. So you're going to be wanting to move outside of your base and begin exploring the map very early on, at least in these early missions, because you don't want to let this rebellion grow even more and hit you with a you know, omega-sized wave at the end. Plus, you're going to be leaving these resources on the table that you could be gathering by going out and exploring the map. And this is something that featured in both of these starter missions so far. So I don't know if this is going to be something you'll see in every single mission, but these first two mission types are quite similar, which is to go out, explore the map, and begin clearing it. If you leave these camps up as well, they will also occasionally send troops toward your castle to try to harass you. So it'll be a good idea to get up some walls and some basic towers as well early, and just becomes one more reason why it is useful to go ahead and take those out on the early part of the game. Now, as you begin to progress through the mission, eventually you will have a pop-up, as you can see here above my mini-map, that shows that a wave is incoming, and it will show you the direction that it is coming from. This is very reminiscent of They Are Billions, if you've ever played the zombie defense survival strategy game, which is also fantastic if you haven't played it, and shares a lot in similarity with this one. So you'll need to quickly erect your walls, get some towers up, start positioning your archers, because that wave is coming very quickly. Now, since this is the first mission that I've ever done, I wasn't really sure, you know, how the AI and stuff was going to operate or which direction it was going to come from. And this becomes part of the challenge as well. You have to sort of be on your toes and try to adapt as these waves come at you. You have a couple of different options for defending. In this case, since it's very early in the game, we're mostly just going to be using archers. We could, in theory, throw up a gate so we can march some melee troops out there. And there's also some very limited magic that we have available to us, which does get more complex and more powerful as the game goes on. Right now, all it allows us to do is to summon some additional melee troops. But we don't really need it because this is a very simple first wave. Very, very clean, very simple. So we successfully defended. Our walls went up just in time, and we repelled the first wave of the peasants trying to attack us. Now, you might be wondering, how crazy does it get? How out of control can it get? Well, let's just show you a little quick preview. But we're not ready for that. So let's just go back to our nice little calm, simple peasant life here in the first mission, shall we? We'll get to that kind of craziness later on, right, when the full release of the game gets here. But that's just a little preview of how upscaled things can get, and that is really just the beginning. And it's one of the reasons why, when I initially looked at some footage on this game and the Steam page, I thought this might be more of a sort of tab style sandboxy kind of game where it's just about hordes of stuff coming at your base, and you just sort of like playing around with the unit formations and the defenses and things like that, and not realizing that there was a bigger component with the survival and strategy elements tied into it. And with the 1.0 releases we've kind of already covered, it's also going to have a campaign that, you know, based on what I've seen so far, I like the humor of these devs, so I'm looking forward to it. So from the simple onwards to the big stuff. So maybe in the future when 1.0 actually drops, we'll do some follow-up videos on this game and show more of it. So as we have continued to progress through the story of the first mission, we got another wave coming in. This one's going to be a little bit stronger, and will give us a little bit of a look at some of the magic that we have available early on in the game. Now, I was sort of a little bit distracted here trying to clear out some camps. Didn't quite realize that this attack was coming quite as suddenly as it was, and I found myself a little unprepared. I hadn't shifted over some troops and things like that like I should have. And this, I leave this footage in here to show you some of the dangers of this kind of style of game when you're trying to balance gathering resources, clearing out the map, building up defenses, trying to do all these multitude of things all at once. If you neglect one, especially on higher difficulties, you can find yourself in a bit of a scary situation. Now, luckily, I'm able to supplement my defense a bit with the magic, but even this could be a mistake, right? Like having to use these finite amount of crystals that power your magic so early on when you should be saving them up for bigger, more powerful spells, especially at higher difficulties. But in this case, I knew that I had enough to defend with those crystals being utilized and moving over some of the archers. Even here, I didn't really use the archers too optimally. I didn't even realize at this point that you can actually station archers on top of the gate, and those little squares on top of the gate. I should have moved some over there as well. But, you know, as you can see, like, that was already a more difficult defense, and it was only the second one. So it's still pretty tame at this point. And even now, we've put ourselves in a position where we conceivably could have lost by being out of position. Now I want to move on to the end of the first mission here and kind of show you the final wave. Now, as you can see up in the corner, we did clear the entirety of the map. We took out all the additional little peasant camp. That way they don't get a more powerful final wave at this point. So we should be in pretty good shape. We've got our defenses built up pretty decently. Even though we're a little bit weak here on the right-hand side, still trying to get those up and going. You know, I definitely was not the most efficient or prepared in this mission for everything, especially as I say, this was our first time playing, and we were playing on a bit of an elevated difficulty. But that's part of the fun, is trying to adapt to things quickly and make those changes and sort of the rush of potentially making a huge mistake. So as you can see now at this point, we're being hit on two different sides. So that's a little bit scarier, right? And the waves are getting quite large already. So I'm going to start throwing some of our summoned units out there just to sort of slow them down, break them up a little bit. The summoned units are pretty weak. They don't do just a ton of damage, but they are good as like sort of filler to distract the enemy. We didn't even have our catapult really in a good position there, as you can kind of see. I didn't know at this point that you could build a tower and park the catapult on top of it, so it has a nice range from afar to do pretty good damage. I also was going to send it over to the left, thinking the right was going to hold with no problems, and then I saw the tower fall, so I started running back over there all of a sudden, and then oops, there goes the left side as well. And keep in mind, like I say, this is the first mission, and already it's getting a little hairy at points, right? It's getting a little scary. Like, we could have very easily lost this mission if we had been just even a little bit less prepared. But we also could have made the mission a whole lot easier if we were more prepared, right? So this is where you get to see a little bit of how your gameplay can influence the mission. And keep in mind, again, what we said earlier about the starting location and the resources we had available are also going to be different every time. So if we would have failed this mission here and decided to restart the entirety of the mission, it would have been the same objectives, but the directions they would have attacked from and where we would have had walls and stuff available to build at and the terrain would have been different. So, right? So even if you play through these missions over and over again and on the same difficulty just for fun, the layouts are going to be different, which I think is very exciting. I like that a lot. I like when there's variety. I like roguelikes and stuff like that quite a lot, where it's different every time. And this, I wouldn't call it a roguelike, but you know, it obviously has that little bit of randomness to it. You can see here we already killed almost 1,300 enemies in our very first mission. And here comes our good buddy, our counselor again, to congratulate us. My lord, you've done it. The uprising has been crushed. Survived peasants agree to pay your taxes. So, you know, hey, we did it. We stopped the rebellion, right? Like, that's the end of the story, huh? Turns out our quartermasters trying to celebrate may have overdone it a little bit. Some people were... some taverns got burned down. But oh wait, a pigeon has arrived with a message from our uncle. Peasants are also, revolts seem to be happening all over the lands. In our uncle's lands, there's another rebellion brewing. So, of course, we, as the only one that can handle this, correct? We must immediately go to our uncle's aid and save him from this uprising, right? Only we could do this, not our uncle. So, here and now you get into the next mission. So the choices that we are given here, as we have previously mentioned, is between the crown and the peasants. It says May 4th, 1491, thousands of peasants from all over the country flocked to the banners of one Scott the Bloody. My uncle's castle is the last barrier to his army reaching the capital. King Ferdinand II the Fat ordered me to stop the renegade at any cost. And you'll see here that the mission objectives are much like the first mission. Says repulse all enemy attacks and to clear the map of all enemies in order to reduce the size of the final attacking wave. And at this point, you can choose which one you want to support. Again, for the king, says show the backward rebels who's in charge and squash their imposter leader like a cockroach. Or if you decide to side with the people, and by extension, Scott the Bloody, teach the crowned vulture a lesson, side with the downtrodden people of Samrania. So as you can see, this option is presented to you right as you start the mission, and they say when 1.0 releases, this branching path system will impact all future missions that you will receive, and then will also change the ending of the game. So you could conceivably go an all royal route where you support the king all the way and crush the rebellion, or go the all rebellion route and support the people. And then they say there's also going to be a third option, which we have no idea what that is going to be yet, where there will be a third faction you can pick from. It's not clear at this point whether you can bounce between them and decide on a different faction in every mission, such as going, hey, I'm going to support the king on this one, but in the next mission, I'm going to support the peasants, to create sort of a fun little, excuse me, back and forth kind of situation where one side keeps taking over the other. I'm very interested to see how much choices they're going to give you here, but I did want to show this sort of dialogue screen here where you get to make this decision. So let's go ahead and select for the people real quick. It says, stand up to tyranny. You will become a traitor to the crown. The king will not forgive you, and you will not be able to return to the task he asked you to do. Besides, the path of a regime fighter is thorny, and the upcoming missions will be much harder to complete. Now, I don't know if this is very literal, where they're saying, hey, choosing this option, the game's gonna get harder because you're choosing the disadvantaged faction. If it is, I think that's kind of a cool thing to add in there. So it begins to move off to a new, different path here. We go down to River Fork, and it says, you gave Scott the Bloody your best men and let his people pass safely to their march to the capital. The rebel leader gave you his word that he would be on the throne within a week and that he would thank you royally. But before the embers could cool, Scott returned with a badly shattered army and eyes wide with terror. The king knew that you had defected, and a whole army was on its way to Pandarain to put an end to the unrest. As a traitor to your country with a hefty bounty on your head, you were forced to flee south with Scott's remaining forces. So we decided to support the rebels, and as a result, the king crushed them, and now we are at a disadvantage. So now we have a new mission, different from the one that we had before, that now says 14th of May, 1491, all is lost. And for the second week, we are retreating. Supplies are running low. The king's army is chasing us all over Samrania. We have no choice but to find a stronghold and prepare for a siege. And again, we have the objectives of repulse all enemy attacks, kill all enemies in the area to reduce the final attacking size, and Scott the Bloody must survive. So we're having something of a hero unit now presented to us, who has a objective where he has to survive. And he's shown here on this horse, looking very proud and fancy. So the first time I made this choice, I actually chose the crown, which is why I decided to go ahead and pick the peasant uprising this time to see what was different. So you get different units, rebels with scythes, these like kind of giant looking guys, which they call four doors, which I'm not sure why. Maybe a reference to Hodor from Game of Thrones. And then obviously we have Scott the Bloody himself, who's a fairly beefy unit, double the health of our giant, and double the attack as well. So he's pretty strong, but he could conceivably be overwhelmed and killed. We got rebels with shields, and I don't see any ranged units. I'm not sure if they get ranged units. Obviously, we got a catapult, though, which is a form of ranged, a very aggressive ranged. And right away on this mission, you can see that we're going to get a wave immediately. There's no time to sit back and prepare. They're going to hit you with a wave almost immediately because you're on the run. So this is kind of neat. I like the way that this is coming together, giving you these different scenarios and different options to choose from, and then those influencing the future missions. Now, as you kind of already seen, the mission objectives, you might be thinking, these feel a little repetitive. Defend wave, clear map. We've seen that now twice in a row with not a lot of variance. I think they understand that, and this was just meant to be a preview because they do specifically say in the information they gave us about 1.0 that there will be more mission types. And in a trailer that they put out, they also mentioned that there will be some attacking missions where instead of building up your castle and defending from waves, you will instead be attacking a castle and be bringing it down to the ground yourself, so you can kind of flip the tables. So that's all very exciting as well. They also promise lots of other, cool features like bosses, waves of undead that you will have to defeat, dragons, all kinds of different stuff. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if they include more magic as well, because there's only like 4 little spells down here. So lots of things coming in the future release, maybe even some expansions on the research tree or something like that. So, but we're not going to play through this whole mission right now. We'll like I say, we may return to this game in the future because this game is pretty cool. I do want to play more of it outside of the sponsor video we're doing today. So in addition to the campaign mode, which we've already covered is going to be getting a big update, they also have challenge modes with a variety of different pre-made scenarios, again with funny names and interesting choices to be made. Even the difficulty challenge things down here all have fun names and stuff like that. Good with popcorn and beer. I'm a mage. I don't need an army. Very Phantom Menace, right? So this is fun. The developers really show off their humor over and over again throughout this, and I really enjoy it. And I definitely want to dive into some of these challenge modes and stuff like that now that we have a better grasp of how to play the game. They also have a sandbox mode, which presents you with a variety of different sort of options and different things to pick from here if you just want to go in and build and tool around and play with the game a little bit. And then they have an endless mode, which, self-explanatory, where the game will just not end. It'll probably just keep throwing stuff at you and get more and more and more out of control. You can kind of just see how long can we survive in this mode. And it will track your record of how long you've survived and stuff like that on each mode. So you could easily spend, even outside of the campaign, which they're promising over 100 hours worth of missions and content, another 100 to 200 hours just playing through all of these, if this game is really your kind of cup of tea. So that is going to be our, initial kind of look at diplomacy is not an option. I don't know what diplomacy not being an option means exactly. It's even here in the options menu where it says diplomacy is not an option and you can turn it off. No. So I think again here, this is just sort of them showing their humor, right? Even in the options menu, there's this kind of like a little Easter egg where you really never have the option to say, yes, diplomacy is not an option. It's right there in the title. No matter what you choose, the answer is still no, there is no diplomacy. So I really like what I've seen from this game so far. If you're into games like this, I would relate it to, like I said in the beginning, the Stronghold series, other types of games like They Are Billions, and even has some stuff in common with more traditional, I guess what you might call strategy games like StarCraft, Warcraft, Heroes of Might and Magic, and stuff like that. With a sort of its own unique little twist of the survival elements, which I personally really enjoy. So if any of this sounds like it's your bag and you want to check it out, do consider picking this game up. As I said, the 1.0 release is coming in September, so it's very, very close now, where they will release the fullness of the campaign, which campaign and story objectives are always my favorite modes to play. So I'm very much going to definitely dive back in when that is available to everyone. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like on the video and maybe subscribing to the channel to support the content that we do here. And if you, if there's anything you liked about the video or even this game or disliked about it, feel free to drop it down in the comments as well. I like to have conversations with you guys. I like to get some back and forth going. And I'm always interested to hear from you guys as long as it is constructive. So let's keep it positive down there, even when we're being negative, and at least be constructive about any feedback either on the video or about the game itself. I also do want to make it very clear that this was a sponsored video, which will be in the title as well. This CD key was given to me in order to cover this game specifically. So full transparency, will also say here at the end of the video as well that this was a sponsored video from the developer. So go support these guys. I think they're doing some great stuff. I love their humor. I love their attitude so far. And this was Diplomacy is Not an Option. Thank you very much.